By the end of this video, you're gonna know how to financially plan for future goals. And so there's a few steps involved to do that. Let's break them down one by one. So one of the first things that we do at Good Fruit Investors when we talk about it in our courses is we rank our goal importance. And so what that means is, I'm going to flip over to my screen here. You can see typical ranking. These are common rankings from 1 to 9 here. These are quite common amongst people that are investing and trying to plan out their lives. And so what we suggest doing is actually writing down each of these goals so that you can actually have them all broken down for which ones are important to you. So a lot of times healthcare can be really important because if we don't have our health, then we're not able to take care of all of the other aspects of our life. Again, this isn't financial advice. This is simply for educational purposes. No one knows your unique situation, but we're just trying to give you some tools so that you can break it down. So when we look at our emergency fund, we know that the emergency fund is a common thing that people save up for because, life throws different curveballs. You could have a car breakdown. Anything can happen really in life. And so that's where that emergency fund comes in. And then we've got things like our retirement. So retirement tends to be important and maybe an afterthought because, we don't really think about it until we're actually there. But when we actually plan for our retirement, that's actually a vulnerable time in our lives because we're not able to necessarily take care of our own, physical needs as much. And it starts to, deteriorate over more and more time. And so that's a goal to a good goal to have. Having a home, starting a business, vacation, kids' education, luxuries, all of those things. You have to prioritize those goals for yourself. A lot of people don't just use this list. They actually reorder these things because they find that their goals and their priorities in life, are different from others. And so that's totally fine. But the key thing here is that you really need to actually map out which goals are important. Because once you know which goals you're actually needing, then you're able to quantify them. Because what ends up happening in life that I've found is that if I'm thinking about my kids and everything's just about the kids at that point in time, I'm actually just kind of putting on the guardrails, kind of like a horse when they're just, singularly focused and they're not paying attention to everything around them. That's what tends to happen with our goal setting. And so a lot of times we actually need to remove those barriers and we need to look at all of our goals and be able to weigh them out amongst each other. And so that we can actually determine which ones are important because we might be able to prioritize only a few or, maybe we want to prioritize them all. It really depends on what your goals are. So that's one of the first things to do. Now, the second thing that we want to do is we want to look at setting our targets. And so one of the key things to do is you might be saying, well, I don't know how much I'm going to need when I go to retire. Right. That's a very good point. How do I know how much I'm going to need? I remember researching for a super long time trying to figure out what is the exact number, finding articles that are like saying, it's 750,000, it's 1 million, it's 2 million. What is it that I need so that when I go to retire, how am I going to be able to be comfortable? And so it's really actually quite simple to be able to break it down. And one of the easiest ways to look at it is, do you know how much it costs to live today? Do you know how much it costs to go to the grocery store, to pay for your utility bills and the like? And then you might be saying, well, that's not going to be the true cost for the future. Exactly. And so that's one of the first goals, one of the first steps in determining that goal is, first off, find the value of what it is that you're wanting today in today's value and write those things down so that you know what those costs are. And so for something like retirement, you can look at, okay, well, I'm going to need, to have a vehicle on a regular basis. I'm going to need to have, all of these regular monthly expenses. So break down what those monthly expenses are and say, okay, this is how much actually I need per year. So now you know how much you need per year. And so, let's say, for example, let's use retirement. This is probably one of the more difficult ones. So let's say, somebody is going to be more conservative. Let's say they have a lot of their debts already paid for, all of that kind of stuff. They're planning on being mortgage free. So let's say they're looking at $100,000 today, right? So for some people watching might be laughing and scoffing at this and saying, I actually need a lot more, or, other people that are really tightwad and cheap, and they might be saying, I could do like half that. Whatever it is, you decide. But the thing is, break down those numbers, how much it's going to cost on a monthly basis for your expenses. And then what you want to do is be able to say, okay, so let's say $100,000. Well, I'm going to retire, let's say, in 32 years. So what do? So in my today's value, I would put something in this part here. I'd put $100,000. So I would know that today's value, I need $100,000. And then I need to times that by 1.02, which is 2% inflation. Inflation happens at usually around 2%. You could argue that you could use 3% to stay more conservative because it's not always at 2%. That's the target that they try to aim for, but inflation tends to fluctuate, right? So it could be higher, it could be lower, but on average, I think it's actually been a little bit higher than the 2%. So you could say I'm going to go 3%, 2%. For this, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm going to say they're benchmarking 2%. I'm going to use 2%. So here's what I do. So I do 1.02 to the power of whatever the amount of years are. So I said 32 years. So let's go over to a calculator here. So you can see in this calculator, there's this A-B button. This is the key thing that we got to pay attention to, okay? Now, on some calculators, it's XY, and that's the power 2. So you can just look it up, find out, on your scientific calculator, where is the power 2 button. And so what we would do is we do the power 2 portion of the calculation first. So I'd take 1.02, and I would do to the power of 32. Now what this will do is give me a number right here, 1.8845. So now I know that if I want to factor in 2% inflation growth year over year, now I'm going to know how much I'm going to need. So what am I going to do with this number here? Well, I'm going to go 1.8. So then we'll press enter. Now we're going to go 1.8845. And now I'm going to times that by 100,000. Do I have enough zeros there? I think so. So we can see that I need 188,450. So now we know how much we're actually going to need in order to have the same lifestyle that I'm aiming towards. You could do the same thing for a vehicle. Let's say you take $40,000 for a vehicle and you need to get one in 5 years from now. You do the exact same type of calculation. You know exactly how much money you need to save for. And so for retirement, you might be saying, but Aaron, when I go to retire, I'm actually going to be living off of this income. So how much do I actually need? And so with this calculation here, we know that we're trying to get $188,450. So now that we've determined this, when it comes to retirement, because we're actually needing to have retirement go out for the next 30 years, on average, there's a thing called the 4% rule. So you would say, okay, if I need $188,000, over the course of those, 30 years, then how am I going to be able to project that out with the 4%? And so with the 4% rule, all you would do is take that 188,450 and we divide this by 0.04. Now we know that we need $4,711,000 in order to retire and have the 4% rule applied. And so then, now that we know actually how to quantify what we need for retirement, now we can determine how we want to save up for that goal. So that's the first step. Now, when you go for a vehicle, you don't have to do this part of the process. You don't have to, look at doing that 4% rule principle. And for most of the other goals, you don't actually need to do that. But for something like retirement, that's probably the one-off situation where you need to do that. And that's because you need to project out how much you're going to be needing over the next 30 years. So now when you look at, people saying you need to have this much money or that much money, it's like, you don't need to go off of that anymore. You can actually determine it based on life standards. You might be able to say to yourself, okay, I have a rental supplement. So half my house is rented out. So now I actually don't need as much money for retirement. I'm going to cut that in half. Right? So if you're going to cut that in half, you could look at this goal and say, okay, I only need 50,000. Well, you could do the calculation all over again. In this calculation, I can just simply look at it and say, okay, I'm going to cut that $4,711,000 in half. And so we're going to try that. we're going to go off of that. And so we're going to take that 4,000. So I'll just press enter. So I'll take that 4,711,250, and I'm going to divide that by 2. Because let's just say that I'm not actually going to, have that much exposable income, and I'm going to have other ways of supplementing my income. So in that case, I'm going to be able to change that variation. And so I know that I need 2,355,000. Okay, so let's just, for simple math's sake, we're going to say 2.4 million. Okay? That's what we're going to go off of. Let's go back over to our goal target. You can see number 2 here. This is pulled from one of the courses that we have. Now we want to return the average annual return of investment. So we're not going to go over all of that. We're just going to guess what your annual return will be for your investment. You might already have investments somewhere. So you might be saying, okay, well, I have a financial advisor and he's saying that my average is probably about 7% a year that we should calculate, or 6%, or 8%, or 9%, whatever it is, whatever your number is, use it. But we're going to go off of just a really basic 9%. So we're going to just say 9%. We're going to have it steadily invested. We're going to have a simple allocation of bonds and stocks. And so, when we did our averages, we're looking at about 9%. I'm not going to get into all of that investing stuff. We do have courses on these things, and we do have stuff that we teach on this stuff and more videos to come out on it, but we just want to look at the goals. And then we're going to use a compound interest calculator. So our average annual return, we're going to just say is 9%. And then we're going to use a compound interest calculator. So what we need to do is go over to our calculator again here. So I'm going to go over to another calculator. This is a compound interest calculator. And in this example, we're going to say that, let's say we have $100,000 already saved away. This is what we have. Now we have 32 years. What we've talked about is we have 32 years to obtain the money that we need. And now we're going to do 9%. And we can see here, if I calculate without adding a single penny to this, I can find out where we're at. So we are already at 1.762%, and we need to get to 2.4 million. So all we have to do now is just add in additional dollars on a regular basis. So let's say on a monthly basis, I'm going to add $200 on a monthly basis. And now I calculate that. I can see I have 2.2 million. So now I'm going to go a little bit higher than that. So let's just say we're going to go 250. Getting close. Let's go to 300. There we go. $2.4 million in that 32-year time horizon. Then we know we can apply that 4% rule, and we can do that. And you might say, well, how do I know that's going to be the number that I stick with for 32 years? You don't. And so the thing that I suggest doing is looking at it every year. So doing a recalculation once a year. So like maybe inflation went rampant, maybe it went super low. So when you go to project out, or your expenses might change. You might actually have less expenses or more expenses that you're expecting. And so then you fluctuate that. And then what you're doing is you're smoothing out how much money you're putting away, because your monthly payments are going to be calculated to get to that target. So, if you are trying to increase that number, and you do that reassessment in the year, you might go $320, or you might go $350, or let's say you've got a lot more money than you anticipated. So now you're dropping that monthly amount that you're putting away to $250, which means that you get more money to spend today. But the goal is that you're able to actually project out your goals. You're demystifying this whole process. You're looking at your goals objectively. You're able to calculate every single goal down to its granular number. You can project out monthly how much money you need to put away. You know how much your investments on average grow. You're recalculating on an annual basis. And therefore, you're able to stay on target towards your goals. And you're able to know that you have the peace of mind knowing that you're able to function and have all of the regular things that you spend your money on, all of the things that you normally spend on. But then when it comes to investing, you have this chunk of money that you know you need to put away. So whether it's, you do all the calculations for all your goals that you have, and it's $700, $800, $500, all of those things help you to determine what you need to put away. And some people might be watching this and saying, well, I don't really want to do goals. I don't really care about my goals. Well, then don't. But if you don't, you're going to pay 100% of the cost of everything that you go to buy. Another dynamic that you'll end up doing is you'll end up having to pay sometimes interest for, debt that you need to pull in order to actually buy different things. So you actually pay more money on average for the items that you buy than somebody who simply invested and had their money grow so that when they go to purchase their items that they're needing to buy, they can buy at a discounted price because the investment's paid for a good chunk of it. Now, here's the trick to this, though, is that if you put too much money aside, you end up depriving yourself of life now. And so that's the real challenge here, is that you need to find that sweet spot between how much money do I need to invest and how much money do I not need to worry about. And it all is so dependent on the person. It's so dependent upon your life goals. It's so dependent on everything that you have going on in life. So these are the types of things that I would suggest doing when you're looking at your goals. So again, prioritizing your goals, number one. Number two is being able to calculate how much you need for that goal, knowing how much it's going to cost in the future. And we did that calculation. Then the third thing is we need to be able to find out how much interest we're going to be accumulating on the money that we're saving. And once we know that, we're able to figure out how much money we're actually needing to put away on a monthly basis to get to that target goal when we actually need that money. So these are the steps to follow if you want to have a basic approach to having your goals met when you are trying to aim for something financially.